You should have a file, a data file that looks very similar to the one that I have on this screen. Yours will be slightly different due to the class data that we've collected. What we're going to look at is how to group the number of texts per day and display them in a graph and determine how many texts per day were sent. We'll also look at the average number of texts per day by age group. What I'm going to show you is some formulas that can be used to make things a whole lot easier, and also how easy it is to do charts in Microsoft Excel. So we're looking at the age and the number of texts per day. Again, we're going to start off with text per day. We want to look at a range. So what we'll do is we'll type in our range here. It'll be our minimum number of texts per day, the maximum number of texts per day, and we want to count. This will make more sense as we go along. So we'll look at groups of 5. So we're looking at a minimum of 0 to a maximum of 4, which is 5 numbers actually. And then we'll look at groups of 5, and you can use a formula to make this very easy. 0 plus 5. So 0 plus 5 equals 5. Then we drag this over. That's 9, 4 plus 5. And then we simply drag that whole thing down, and it populates our groups. So what we're looking at is how many people sent 0 to 4, how many people sent 5 to 9, how many people sent 10 to 14, etc. So we use a function called countifs, and the countif statements are very powerful because they allow you to go into a group of data and set up a range and only count things within that range, which will be our 2 max and min numbers. So we'll use a formula called countifs, equal countifs, and it asks you what to do. Criteria range. So we're looking at column B, that's the criteria range, the range that we're looking at. And criteria 1 is going to be, and you need to put this in as text, is going to be, text is annotated by quotations, is greater than or equal to the minimum value. And again, now it tells you again criteria range 2, which is going to be the same criteria range as 1 because you're looking at the same data, is less than or equal to the maximum number. And hit enter. We should have a number, and there it is. So what that's telling you is that there are 5 instances where the number of texts per day fall between 0 and 4 inclusive. So we do the same thing and drag this down so you can kind of see where all the data falls out. Now there's some spurious data here at the end. We'll go ahead and delete that. Oop. There we go. So you can see, pretty easy to count how many times these things happen. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make a graph of this count. The graph, charts in Excel are super easy. We'll just hit the tab up here that says charts, and then we'll go to column because we want easiest to see this in a column. Clustered column, and there you go. So that's a chart of that data. Now, you can see on the axis on the bottom is probably not what we want. We want to have some indication of the what we're looking at here. So you can go into select data, and it'll allow you to tailor exactly where it grabs the information from. We want category X along the bottom labels, so we click on that, and we'll go ahead and use the minimum value like that, and then hit OK. So what you've got is a chart that shows how many texts per day people normally send. You can see there's a fairly steep curve going up to the maximum and then dropping off fairly significantly as well. So that's a chart. You can do a lot of other things with this chart. For instance, we're redundant on the legend, so you can delete the legend like that. You can add circles and arrows, things like that. Second thing we're going to do is kind of a similar approach, but we're going to take a look at by age. So again, we're looking at statistics and probabilities. So we're going to set up a histogram, and we've talked about histograms in class of at a certain age how many texts per day are people sending? What's the average number of texts per day? So take a similar approach. Okay, we'll go min age, and then go max age. and then we'll go average number. Okay, we could actually use the same information here as we did. I mean, even though this is counts, the ages actually work the same way. And just for brevity, we'll go ahead and go paste special values. Okay, and now we're going to do, so what we're looking at is in age groups of 5 years, how many texts are sent by these folks. So we go equal, and again we use the averages if, average ifs statement. Okay, and it'll ask you what you want, how to set the formula up. So the average range is going to be B, all right? This formula is slightly different than the count if. You just have to read what it says. So criteria range 1 is going to be age, and then we go is greater than or equal to the minimum age, and criteria range A is less than or equal to and the maximum age. Now it's got division by 0, which means there's a there are none in that. Let's drag it down to make sure that it works for the ones where there is. There you go. So we'll just go ahead and put zeros in here because it's trying to do an average where there's no values, and we can put 0 in. But otherwise, you can kind of see. Let's take a look. There might be some 60 or better. There are. So let's go ahead and add the information for the next couple of groups. We'll just keep going down until we get to 0. There we go. Okay. Now we will take a look at how to chart this data. And again, we're setting up a histogram. We'll do it as a scatter plot first, and then we'll do it as a well, we'll do this as a histogram, not a scatter plot. Well, let's do a scatter plot too. Quick way to do a scatter plot: we grab the data in both of these columns, and we choose the scatter plot, mark scatter, and it inserts that for us. Where the heck is it? Oh, okay, move that down. Okay, so you can see this is kind of what our data looks like when it's presented in a scatter plot. You can get a sense of what's going on. This is the age. These are the ages on the bottom. This is the number of texts on the top, on the y-axis. You can kind of get a sense that the mid-range here is where most of the texting is occurring. Now, from a probabilities and statistics standpoint, this doesn't really do us a lot of good. What we're looking for is the averages here. So what we'll do is we'll set up another chart, and what we'll do is we'll grab this, and again we're going and looking at it as a column, clustered column. Okay, and we'll layer this right underneath it. So you can kind of see that this gives us a much more usable picture of data. We'll go ahead and change this axis here on the bottom. Select data, axis labels. Okay. So you can tell this is basically a classic distribution point. It's a right-tailed, but we can use this information to determine a lot more about the data that we have. I'll show you one more formula before we go, and that's standard deviation. Again, if you want to, Excel's got just a ton of formulas, but let's look at the, now it doesn't give you a standard deviation if, so it won't go in and take the standard deviation of stuff that meets a specific criteria, but we can get a standard deviation for a certain age group. So let's go ahead and look at the, the age group, let's say 15 to 19. All right, so we go into here, go equals standard deviation, And then what we want to do is look at the age group 15 to 19. So we start here on 15 and we grab all this information and then that. And then instead of having to go through and do all the calculations, it automatically calculates it for you. So 28.65 plus or minus 10. So that's, again, pretty easy to do. I want you to take your time and go through and mess around with the formulas. We'll also look at, I'm going to go to, got this sheet too. We'll go ahead and look at dimensions here. This is the dimensions of the box that we measured. So this is each of your teams and the 3 tries that you made. Again, your data may be different, but again, we mentioned standard deviation before, but let's take a look at what's the average length and get the standard deviation and see how that affects volume. So this would equal the average of these values. Okay, 12.0, and the actual dimension is about 12 inches, so pretty close, even though there was some variation in the measurements. And this is we're going to find the standard deviation of the same data set. So 12 plus or minus 0.2 inches. Now we can get that, that's for the length. Let's go ahead and look at width and height. And again, when you drag this over, it just automatically applies it. So actual height was about 5 inches, and we're pretty close, and the same thing with the width. Let's take a look at how volume works. And again, you can see how Excel is a very powerful program. Volume is simply the product of those 3 dimensions, equals length times height times width. So the volume is, and then we'll drag this over to get the standard deviation. So what you can see here is that the volume's pretty straightforward, but the error that propagates through, this is a fairly small amount of error, but when you propagate it through the entire, when you multiply it into 3 dimensions, the error becomes substantial, a little more substantial than it is here. So what I would like you to do is take a look at the dimensions, the 3 dimensions, and basically set up a graph that looks similar to the chart that I have here on the right, and just see how you can manipulate your data and play around with the different formulas and some of the things you can do with charts. Good luck. Thank you.